Hi ladies, this is Mrs. Newton. This tutorial is going to teach you how to style your Bootstrap web pages, and so how to create CSS custom styles to change up your Bootstrap so that it's not just gray and have the default Bootstrap styles. And so I'm just going to show you some of the basics. There's a lot more you can do with things like templates and different themes, but I'll show you those later on in the quarter. So today I'm going to talk about adding custom Bootstrap CSS, so creating custom CSS for your Bootstrap pages. And so to start out, you're going to need to create your own CSS file. The example that I'm going to be working with today is the Bootstrap grid layout assignment, and so that is, we've left off with that right here where we had the assignment, but we also added in a couple of components like the image thumbnail and the navigation bar. So I'm going to be creating some styles for this web page, and so if you would like to follow along, you can do so, which I do recommend. So first things first, we're going to need to create a new CSS file. So I'm going to say File, New, and then I'm going to say File, Save As, and we're going to want to save it inside of the folder with the Bootstrap grid practice. Remember to please organize your files by type. So if you don't have a CSS folder yet, you're going to want to create one. I think you guys may already have a CSS folder, which is great. And in the CSS folder is where we're going to save this. Again, in your download, you might already have some files in there. Just ignore those. Don't worry about them. Leave them there. We're going to create an additional CSS file that's our own. And so you can call these, you can call it whatever you want, custom styles, my styles, just styles, whatever. I'm going to call it example.css. Just please make sure that you put .css as the file extension. And then you click Save. And here we go. Alrighty, so just a best practice here, 1 second. And found it, etc. Okay, so now once you've created your own CSS file. Next, we need to link the HTML to our CSS. We've done this for all of our other HTML and CSS files, but something that's going to be really important for you to remember is that when we create this link to the CSS file, we need to include the link after the Bootstrap CSS link. Okay, and so what that means is when you're looking at the code at the head section of the Bootstrap grid layout.html, you are going to need to add your link after the Bootstrap's link. And so this links to the Bootstrap CSS. Any CSS that we create, we want to overwrite Bootstrap CSS. And I've talked to you guys about how whenever CSS executes, it starts at the top and goes all the way down to the bottom of the page. And so after we've applied all of Bootstrap CSS, then we want to start applying our custom CSS so that any rules that we have that conflict with Bootstrap, ours will overwrite Bootstrap's. And so any color preferences that we include, any font things that we change, we want them to use our styles instead of the Bootstrap default styles. Okay, so make sure your CSS link goes after the Bootstrap link. And so inside here, we're going to make a link. The H reference needs to point to your new CSS file. So CSS and whatever you named it, example. Mine is example.css. Okay, we're going to need a relationship, which is a style sheet. The type is optional, but if you want to include that, you can. And then we're done. So now our example CSS file that we just created should be linked to this HTML file. All right, and so once you've done that, we can, some styles you're going to be able to do just like we have in the past. So like, let's say I want to change the background color of the whole body. I can go to my CSS and type in body. And let's say that I make the background color. I like this little aquamarine color. So, oops, I have that right there. And so once I look at this, all of a sudden, hey, you see that the background color got updated, which was really nice. Terrific. Okay. So you can do some things like that. So you can select the body, you can select H1s, H2s, etc., and style those as you like. But something else we can do is we can take advantage of the Bootstrap classes that we have been using or that we've been applying in our HTML. So for example, we have our Jumbotron here. Maybe you want to change the background color of the Jumbotron. And so what we can do is we already know that this, oops, under the navbar, we already know that this div has a class of Jumbotron. So I can write another style for the Jumbotron. And the things that I put in here should hopefully overwrite the things that were inside of Bootstrap styles. So for example, I can say, hey, let's give this guy a background color of maybe that aqua. Looks nice. Great. And then you can see, hey, now that's changed. Okay, and so that's taking advantage of some of the classes that are already in Bootstrap. However, sometimes you'll want to create your own custom classes. Okay, so let's say I want to make this div down here, this row, I want to give it a background color to make it kind of stand out. So I'm going to go ahead and make my own class. I'm going to come down, find the second row, row 2, and it has a class of row, but I'm going to add a new class. I'm going to make the background color coral, so I'm going to just make the class named coral, like that. And then I can add in my new class after Jumbotron dot coral. Background color is coral, and then we have it. All right, you may need to add padding, you may need to add margin. Bootstrap already has pretty good padding and margins, but you see how I can't scroll further down. Maybe I'll put some margin on the bottom of this page or of this div. Margin bottom, 40 pixels or so. Okay, so now I can scroll down a little bit more. Okay, so you can make your own custom classes. You can make your own, even make your own IDs, although make sure if you create an ID that you only put it on one single HTML element. But one more thing, you might run into some problems still, and that's something I'm going to illustrate right now. So let's look at this navigation bar. Let's say I want to change the color so that maybe it matches this coral thing down here. I can look at the code. And I can say, hey, let's look at that nav bar. Here it is. And I can see that the nav bar already has a class called nav bar. So I'm going to select that in my CSS and see if I can overwrite some of the styles. Dot nav bar. And, oops, maybe I'll give this also a background color of coral. And so that's a good start, but like these look kind of bad now. The gray link colors aren't very readable with that coral background. So I'm going to try to change the colors of the text by adding in a style of color white. But when I come back to the page, they didn't turn white. And so this is a little bit of an issue. And so even if you create new classes and IDs, like you can do that to a point, but we don't want to go and add a new class to every single link within this navigation bar. That wouldn't be a very good design. Instead, what we're going to do is we are going to use the Google Inspect Element tool to find out what type of style is overriding the one that I'm using. Remember that CSS styles are always going to be applied in the order of what's the most specific. And so even though we've created a style that should turn this white, there must be another Bootstrap CSS style somewhere within the Bootstrap code that's more specific than the class that I just created. And so we need to find out what that is. If I mean, you can try a couple of other options. For example, I could try, hey, let's do the same thing with nav bar A. So we use like a descendant selector, color white. Also didn't work. So this is where Google Inspect Element is going to come in really handy. So go find the thing you're trying to style, right click on it, and say Inspect. Then we can come and look at what styles are overriding mine. Okay. If I go down far enough, I can probably find my style. There it is. There's my navbar white from my example.css. But all of these things up here are more specific. Even there's my navbar A with the color white, but you notice that it's crossed out. That means something else is overriding it. And so if I keep going up, I can see that this gray color is the color that I'm seeing on the page, and this has a little bit more of a complicated selector, and it's a more specific style. So long story short, if I want to overwrite that color, I need to overwrite that exact selector. So what I'm going to recommend you do is find the thing that's overriding yours, find the selector that's overriding your styles in your Google Inspect tool. Click on the selector and copy and paste that into your CSS. So I know that this color is overriding mine, so I'm going to get this selector, copy it, go to my CSS. That didn't work, so I'm just going to delete it and paste it. And now this selector is going to be the most specific thing I can do. We haven't learned about this symbol. It basically just means A's that are directly nested inside of LIs that are directly nested inside of navbar navs. But that being said, I can put my styles in now, color white, and refresh my page. There they go. And now they are white. Hooray! And that looks a lot nicer. You'll notice these two didn't get updated. That must mean that they have a more specific style. If we look at the home, you're going to see that this has to do with a class of active, an active class. And if we go check out the HTML, sure enough, that list item has a class of active. And so you can decide either to take the class active off, like so. And then it will look just like the rest of them. Ta-da! Or if you decide, hey, I do actually want some kind of active style, you can leave the class on there. But again, you're going to need to find the more specific selector. This one's a lot longer, but you'd copy paste, go to your CSS, and maybe make a new rule. For this guy, I want to have a background color of this light coral, and I want to have a color of black. Okay. And so now you're going to see that update. Maybe white was better. Those probably weren't the best color choices, but you get the idea. And so you can overwrite the Bootstrap styles that were preventing yours from taking effect by right-clicking on something, inspecting it, and then figuring out which color is messing it up. And so like this one has the color, so I would copy and paste that. Go down and add the style for white. Okay. Now, one last thing that I recommend, if you're going to start getting this stuff from the Inspect Element tool, I recommend that you go ahead and use comments to help clarify what you are styling. Because when you come back and look at this later, like this isn't going to mean very much to you. It might take you a few minutes to figure out what that is. So I would recommend putting a comment in here that says, hey, these are the default navigation links. And then maybe this is the active navigation links. And then this one is the navigation brand, whatever brand is. You could probably delete that if you don't need it in your page. But if you're going to start using the Inspect Element tool, please add comments in there because it's going to make your life easier and other people's lives easier when they're looking at your code. But anyway, that's a good summary of how you can start adding your own custom styles and custom colors to your Bootstrap. You can make sure that when you create a CSS file that your link is going to be after the Bootstraps link. And then you just type in your own code. You can add classes if you need, and use that Google Inspect tool if something is getting overwritten. So anyway, good luck. I hope you enjoy adding colors to your Bootstrap pages so they're not just all bland and gray and white from now on. And so as always, come by or let me know if you have any questions, and good luck.